Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the 5th week event. It's kind of hilarious to me that we're already on episode 4 and I've made it a running joke that despite the fact that this podcast is named after a comic book concept, I haven't really talked that much about superheroes. I've talked about RPGs, and I've talked about superheroes in RPGs, and my own writing, but I haven't actually talked that much about superheroes specifically. And this episode is where I'm going to start to turn that around and correct that. Of course, I'm going to talk about other things too, because people did enjoy hearing about the RPG stories, but we're going to talk about superheroes, and this is going to be the start of a subject called Superhero Fridge. And Superhero Fridge is based not on the stuffed in the fridge concept, but about fridge logic. If you don't know what fridge logic is, it's originated from TV tropes where the idea is it's the sort of thing that you don't think about when you're watching a show or reading a book or listening to music. But then you get up, you go to the fridge, and while you're staring at your food, it suddenly hits you that something was different, something was odd, something was more clever than you thought. So this is why that's why it's called Superhero Fridge. Not to be confused with Stuffed in the Fridge. That's a segment from the Pen and Cape Society podcast. Some of you might wonder why I'm not currently participating in the Pen and Cape Society podcast. It's not because I'm not invited. All of us have been invited to either put in plugs or guests and all that. The problem is that I am one of those people who lives in a very rural area and we don't have high-speed internet. In case you didn't know, the Pen and Cape Society podcast, and most podcasts of this type, is done over Skype. Skype sort of requires you to have kind of at least decent internet, and just to give you an idea of what life is like in rural areas, I'm on dial-up. Okay? The reason me getting the laptop was a big thing was because I could actually take it to Starbucks or to the library and I could upload decently sized files. That's why I'm able to do these podcasts now. So I can't do Skype, which means I've missed out on several opportunities because of it. It's sad, but it's one of those things. They just don't run the lines in these areas. I'm hoping that that Google satellite thing really takes off and I'll be able to get it. But until then, that's where I am, and I'm doing my own thing, which is also kind of cool. I get to set my own rules and everything. So, but anyway, Superhero Fridge. So, what are we going into the fridge for this week? This week we are looking at resources. The thing about superheroes is, when you think about superheroes, I think most people think about the powers, the villains, things like that. But one of the most defining things about a superhero is, to quote Jack Nicholson in the first Batman movie, where does he get all those wonderful toys? And I'm not just talking about batarangs and that sort of thing. That's one of the things I really liked about Batman Begins, is we got to see how he got all his bat gear. That was kind of awesome to me, because it did answer where he got all those wonderful toys. But the thing is, okay, you have the excuse for Batman. Why Batman has all the wonderful things? Because he's Bruce Wayne. He can afford all this. He can get these shell companies. He has access to the R&D of Wayne Enterprises. The question becomes, what about the superheroes who aren't filthy rich and don't have a power that lets them do, whatever they need? Like the Green Lantern. The Green Lantern, when he provides this costume, he can create anything he thinks of. It's not an issue. The question becomes, what about people like Peter Parker? Peter Parker has never been wealthy. However, he is wearing a highly tailored, tight-fitting suit all the time that gets wrecked every time he fights. That's one of the cool. That's one of the reasons I like Spider-Man, as a visual, because they are not afraid to beat Spidey up. He will be in his outfit will be shredded when he's in a big fight. But he always finds a way to get it mended. He always has ingredients for his web fluid. Let's not talk about organic webbing. I love the mechanism of the web shooter. The fact that he has to throw up the horns to fire it. That's cool. But yeah, they never really explain that. I know that he's using his photographer money to pay for that on top of other stuff. But they don't really pay that much attention to it. And the thing about it is the thought I always have is the costumes, because everybody has a costume. Everybody has a very well designed costume that's usually form fitting. Somehow without showing their intimate bits. But everybody that decides to be a superhero has a costume. And I thought that was very weird. If you read Descendants, a lot of the people that aren't associated with somebody that's mega rich like Laurel, they have like a homemade costume. When we first introduced Callie, she is obviously wearing something she made out of a pillowcase. Improv from the Second Stringers short. He was wearing something, basically the badass normal version of the duct tape tuxedo. That's Improv's outfit. The white coat, we know that the white coat buys his white raincoats from a distributor. He goes to a discount, a warehouse place. He goes and buys them. And he has to put in work to put it together. That's something that in the mainstream comics, I've never seen dealt with. Like, especially teen heroes. Like, how is a 16-year-old kid finding this badass form-fitting super suit that usually can take a lot of punishment? And today you can get Under Armour. I don't know how much Under Armour costs, but it's not cheap. I think that Under Armour sort of became the bane of superhero superhero designs, because for a while there, the more quote-unquote realistic writers decided everybody was wearing something that was sort of Under Armour. So you had that weird ribbing and stuff all over their clothes. And my thought was, yeah, you would use that as a base, but you wouldn't have all that like showing. You would wear, like, it's called Under Armour. You put something on top of it. But yeah, I always wondered about that. Like, how let's see. I'm trying to think of a good example here. I immediately thought of the Teen Titans. The Teen Titans actually have a justification, most of them. Cyborg doesn't need clothes. Robin is, Batman's protege. Starfire, Starfire and Raven is a good question, because they can't exactly go back to Azeroth and Tamaran for their stuff. So you gotta wonder where. In the comics they don't have this problem, and in the cartoon I thought it was funny. They always had the same wardrobe, and they wore their costumes constantly. So I guess Robin was footing the bill. But I would like. This is one of my deals with superheroes. I want to see that sort of stuff. I want to know where all this stuff comes from, how it was made, how the thought process that went into the design. Like, a lot of them, it's just like, in the 90s, there was a big move toward super, super uncreative costumes. They would have what's called the Union suit. That's that one-piece costume. And they would usually have a triangle that went across their chest that was colored. And that was it. That's your costume. Or they would also have the giant shoulder pads, but that's another story. But I think a good costume is what makes a good superhero. When you stop and think of the superheroes that everyone knows, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. We'll ignore the we'll ignore the New 52 no trunks look because actually let's not ignore that. Superman in the New 52, they took away his trunks. The trunks are, how everybody says they're wearing the underwear on the outside. Those are actually called trunks. Those were the things that the strongmen wore in the circus. And the reason that the characters had those back in the day was so you could differentiate between their legs. You broke up the color scheme between their legs and their torso. So they gave them these strongman trunks, both to invoke a circus strongman and to break up the color. So nowadays you don't actually need them because drawing techniques have gotten to the point where, you can definitely tell, their body shape. But what happened was when they took away Superman's trunks, they left his crotch bare. He's wearing a skin-tight suit. And it's got lines all over it because in the time that they did this, they were going back to that, okay, everyone's outfits are Under Armour. So Superman had all these lines, and every line was pointing directly at his crotch. And it was insane and terrifying because, if there's one thing about Superman that I don't want to think about, and, I like Superman. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, he's too powerful, he's too good. I like Superman. He is the hero that other heroes are inspired by, and I love that concept. But I don't want to think about his junk. Really don't want to think about Kryptonian Wang. Thank you very much. But anyway, back to the main subject is about resources. And there's so much stuff that goes into being a superhero. I don't think a lot of people really think this through. Not just your costume. Let's assume that you have powers that deal with everything but your costume. Well, your powers include your costume. Let's say you're a fire person, you just catch fire and you're encircled by fire. No one knows what the hell you're wearing underneath of it at any given time. So you can wear anything, assuming it doesn't catch fire. But you know what I mean. So keep that in mind. Now let's imagine you're just having your typical villain fight with your basic villain. And this day and age, it used to be that superheroes would have fights and it's like bloodless violence. They punch, they knock out, done. But these days, most of the times you fight, you get messed up. You're going to get black eyes, bruises, cuts, scrapes. How are you taking care of yourself? I guess most stuff, you just go home, you put some ice on it, you get your iodine, cotton swab. This is where the supporting cast is really useful. I think I like when superheroes have their boyfriend, girlfriend, caretaker, whatever, there to either wonder about all the injuries or there to take care of it. I like when they're there to take care of the injuries. Going back to the Batman movies, when Alfred is taking care of Bruce after he got himself set on fire, that was an excellent scene, and it showed just the value of supporting cast in superhero stories. But once again, it's one of those things that's not shown. We have our hero get beat up, and the next day maybe they'll have some bandages on them. But what happens when you get worse hits? That's one of those things that I think superheroes need to think of. I cheated so much with the original Descendants. I specifically designed Melissa's character to be there so I wouldn't have to worry about all that. And then I lampshaded it by having her not there and Warwick ending up in the hospital anyway. But yeah, I took so many shortcuts when I first started the Descendants, and I'm not going to say that I wouldn't do it again, because having Laurel be rich just opened up a lot of things. Having Melissa have her healing powers opened up a lot of things. But I think I would have treated it a little bit more seriously. Well, I would have called attention to it more. like how lucky they are that Laurel is rich and not an asshole. And that's but the thing is that most superheroes, per capita, don't have that don't have that safety net. And that's what I'm back talking about, is you don't have the resources to do it, but they seem to just kind of pull the resources out of their ass, which I understand, because when you're writing the story has to happen. You can't just go, okay, no, reality ensues, and we're gonna watch our hero go do work 9 to 5 for the entire comic. He can't afford more dilithium crystal. Yeah, dilithium crystals. That's a great idea. He can't afford more super juice, so he has to work 9 to 5, and the supervillains just win until he gets his mojo back. You're not going to do that. Eventually you have to just hand it to them, and hope the audience is engrossed enough and enjoys the story enough to not ask that question. And I'm okay with that. I'm honestly going to say that it is alright not to focus on that. At least not all the time. What I am mainly concerned with is taking that time to address it at some point. You see, when I always talk about character stuff in terms of laziness, about skipping over, and I firmly believe that most authors are inherently lazy. We don't really want to do all the work, but we do some work, so we'll cut corners where we can. I think when a skilled author is the author who goes back and goes, okay, but now I have to buckle down and fill in the blanks. Now I have to put thought. Let me correct that. Actually, it is knowing where to put your thought, where to put your effort, that makes a good author. Where to put details, where to answer questions, where to expand things, and where to contract things. You always hear, and I know people that read my blog are tired of hearing me rag on it, you always hear people go, show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. Always show. Unpack everything. No. The secret to being good is knowing what to show, what to tell, and when. Like, some stuff we don't need to know. But there are some things that you need to know, you absolutely need to know, and that's okay to tell. There are some things that you don't really need to know, but it's always nice to show. And that is where the resources issue comes in. We don't need to know where Whitecoat's coat comes from, but I think it adds more to the universe and more to the character that we find out that his girlfriend bought a hat because it looked like the Whitecoat's, not knowing she got it from the same place that he buys his Whitecoat hats. I think that's kind of awesome. And that's the thing. When you add a detail, it should be meaningful. When you deal with these resource things, it should be meaningful. And that's why I don't get mad when we don't find out where certain characters got their costumes and such. Because unless it's going to be interesting, unless it's going to tell us more about the character or the world, we don't need it. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you need to stop and go, how do I make this necessary? How do I make this something that would be interesting and worthwhile? It's not that it's not needed, it's that I haven't decided that it's needed yet. That's another telltale sign of a good author, I believe. A good creator. They don't say this isn't important. They ask themselves if they can make it important. And if it would be good for them to make it important. That's the other thing. You need to also be able to say, that's not important. And believe me, the costume is important. Not necessarily the origin or the upkeep of the costume, but the costume. I have a lot of thoughts on this. Despite the fact that I've used them on several occasions, I don't like biker helmets for superheroes. I gave Laurel one because she has no powers to defend herself that way. She's an excellent martial artist, but one tap to the head is going to bring her down. So that's why she has the helmet on the head. But I generally don't like that look. Like, I know I was a big fan of Power Rangers, coming up. But outside of the whole Power Rangers thing, the whole Sentai thing, I never liked the biker style helmet for a superhero. It just feels lazy. It's the same as the jeans and t-shirt superhero. The only person who's ever pulled that off was Superboy. I'm sorry. No one else does it. Not even Superman, DC. I like some of the Civi normal types of outfits, just not the jeans and t-shirt. What is it? The tank tops and jeans sometimes work. I don't like when it's logoed, but when it's a superhero that's not a name superhero, they're just a guy. Like, if your name is dude slab meat, and you just go by your name and do superheroic things, rock that wife beater, that's a good look. Capes. As much as I love the movie, and it is one of my top favorite superhero movies. Oh, that's a good idea for a blog. It's my top favorite superhero movies. But yeah, I wish The Incredibles hadn't done the no capes. Because every time I see a cape design, and I hear people talk, somebody does the no capes and tries to explain why capes suck. Here's the thing. Capes are interesting, visually interesting. They can flutter, they can flow, they can display the mood around the superhero. They also make flight look not ridiculous. It's very hard to make flight look not stupid on a human being. The cape helps. The cape sort of breaks up the body outline because humans are kind of gangly creatures. We've got, the arms and the legs and the feet, and it doesn't all line up aerodynamically. You put the cape on and have that flow and stream, and that takes your mind off of the unnatural pose that a human has trying to fly. So I like capes. And I also think people don't use capes enough. If you look back in the day when people actually wore capes, there were, I saw this on Cracked, and I actually went and, I've looked for it. I bought a manual on fighting with a cane. And part of the manual on fighting with a cane was fighting with your cape. Because of course you had a cape. Because it was the early 1900s, and you were awesome, so you had a cape. And there was just all this stuff about entangling people with it and blocking their line of sight for your attack and striking them through. You raise your cape in front of them and then hit them with the cane through the cape. It's kind of awesome. And, I think Batman is probably the only superhero that actually uses their cape for things. Feel free to tell me if you know another superhero that does. But, yeah, capes can have utility. So capes are cool. This is just an aesthetic thing, and people are going to make inferences here. I always like the superheroine thing of the tights with the skirt on top. I don't know why. I think it's a good visual, with the boots and the. I think it's not. I don't like the little mini skirt. Supergirl often gets put into these mini skirts or these cheerleader type pleated skirts. I think that's kind of dumb. But when they have a little bit longer, sort of So, you know, when you see depictions of Artemis, and she's got that skirt that comes down to her calves, and it sort of flows, very cape-like. It's like a leg cape. I think that works really well. That's why Tink in The Descendants has a kilt, the Utila kilt. It's between that and it's a nod to X-Men First Class, because one of the early issues of X-Men First Class has Beast trying to rock the Utila kilt and getting mocked by the other X-Men. So I thought that was fun. Other important things. As much as I rag on 90s design, pouches make sense. Not the shit ton of pouches they usually have. But like some pouches. For some reason, heroines are usually the ones that have these. It's one of those sort of mini satchels, like the medieval belt pouch sort of thing, that heroines have strapped to their thigh. I think most superheroes should have that. Because if you've heard my discussions about this, superheroes should be there saving lives, not specifically fighting crime. They should be protecting people. So every superhero should have a first aid kit on them. That is one of my things. If you're super fast like the Flash or Superman, yeah, you can get away with it because you could just super speed to the pharmacy. But everyone that can't do that needs to have that first aid pouch on them. No ifs, ands, or buts. That was my immediate thought when I was doing the Descendants costumes. And if you read the loadout as it evolves, they first started out with the first aid stuff, then they got the rebreather and all this other nice stuff that they carry on them. But first aid kit, so you get a pouch, you get one pouch, maybe two or three, but not the whole bandolier of pouches for no reason that the 90s did. But yeah, pouches are good when you have when you have that little thing called subtlety. Yeah. Extra weapons. I'm not a fan of giving superheroes spare weapons. Like, they should have, if you have an iconic weapon like Green Arrow, Daredevil with his what is it called? The Billy Club. Daredevil's Billy Club. Laurel with her staff that becomes Tonfa. You have that. What I don't like is, and actually I can't justify this. When I just thought about it, a lot of superhero costumes these days, they have a knife, like strapped to their boot or something. And I always found that odd, and I just realized that could actually be useful. You don't have to stab people with it. Cutting people out of seatbelts and stuff, that is very useful. So, I'm okay with the knife. That could cause a problem if you're fighting bad guys, giving them a weapon they could reach for. But that seems like a fair trade. Other design specs. Mask, I have lots of issues with mask. I prefer cowls. The sort of the ninja hood that covers everything but your eyes, or your classic domino mask. I wish those actually worked in real life. You don't see a lot of masks in the Descendants. Everybody has other ways. I'm just trying to stop and think about how they do. Juniper has that quarter mask, theater mask thing. Warwick has his armor. Sin is a shapeshifter. Laurel has the helmet, and God, I want to get rid of that goddamn helmet. The other reason she has the helmet, and this is a sad reality, is she was the only black character at the time. And when you had all these people living together, and you had Ian and Alexis, who were sort of known quantities, and who they were known to hang out with Laurel, if Codex was a black woman, that would automatically be a giveaway. So that's why she is covered head to toe. I rewarded myself, quote unquote, for because I hated it from the beginning. It was a sort of a logical hole that I dug myself in. That's why I had to do it. I quote-unquote rewarded myself by making Kareem's outfit specifically Iranian. Like, super Iranian. So that was a thing, and I am going to redesign Laurel's costume. But yeah, Laurel has the stupid biker helmet. Alexis is covered with shadows. Oh, this is a fun one. Occult, Lisa. Lisa is rocking the constantly shadowed hood, and it is actually magically constantly shadowing her face. And on top of that, when she pulls the hood back, she has a glamour that makes her look like some Nordic chick. I always thought that was cool. Yeah, I like more creativity in my masks. Although I like the classic Domino mask as a design feature, I don't usually use them for my characters. Just because we all know that it wouldn't work. You know, you put on a Domino mask, you talk to your friends, they know it's you. So, you know, anybody that has a picture of you in a Domino mask will know you when they see you. So, a Domino mask is a losing proposition, despite the fact that they look cool. I like some of the ones where they're kind of painted on, sort of like the Ultimate Warrior's face paint without half the insanity. My costume designs, they vary heavily, and also on my whimsy, I put Melissa in this awful, like, 90s Tastic mini skirt with the form-fitting armor over her chest as a joke, like, and then I forgot to take her out of it for something like 3 years of issues. And I finally fixed that. But, yeah, superheroes can be very diverse in their costumes, and I think that became a lost art for a long time. For a very long time, you had just the Union suit one piece, and then you had the Under Armour version. But I like a super costume should be kind of simple, but they should always have at least an iconic piece. I like Matt Groening here when he talked about you should immediately be able to identify a character in profile, and for a superhero you should immediately be able to identify them in silhouette. Even the blandest superhero ever, Cyclops, you recognize him with that stupid condom on his head and the visor, you know. So X-Men have always been a costume disaster. They used to have very unique, individual costumes that had an X incorporated in it that was also their comm. You know, Storm had that badass silver thing with the cape that was attached to her wrist. And Rogue had the bomber jacket over the Union suit, and that was awesome. And then I think it was Morrison. Morrison's run. It was like every time there was genius, there was a giga fail. And he gave them these stupid black outfits with the jacket, the big puffy skiing jacket with an X across it. And oh god, that was awful. That was almost as bad as Secondary Mutations. But I digress. No one cares. Actually, no one does care. I find that interesting. I keep talking to my readers, and so many of you do not follow actual comics. I think that's really cool. I am where you go for superheroes. It's a humbling experience. But yeah, the superhero fridge logic of where do they get those wonderful toys? The answer is wherever the author feels like it. And assuming the author even thinks about it, sometimes this just shows up. I like the idea of somebody being a broker of things for superheroes. If you ever watched the show Kim Possible, there was a dude called Jack Hench that sold crap to supervillains. Like he had a ring that made your minions super muscular, or he would actually rent you minions, or that's where I when I think about villains, I always think about Kim Possible because they did their villains very, very well, and also had this weird bit of world building where villains acted like real people in terms of how they did things. They had conventions. They had magazines specifically for villains. Villainy was a culture. Several times Draken had a timeshare layer. Dr. Draken was the main villain. He had a timeshare layer where he had to be out at a certain time. Or the layer didn't meet his power needs. So I always loved that part about it. And the fact that there was an actual company, Henchco, that sold supervillains their gear. And I think that I want to set up and oh, we're getting to that for villains in the Descendants universe. Just wait for it. But I want there to be someplace where heroes can buy their gear. I think Laurel should set that up. That would be very cool, where, you have the new Lifesavers Incorporated, and you can, well, she probably wouldn't sell it. She has enough money that doesn't have to, profit motive that shit. But she could have, stores, caches, where people could come and get generic devices that they can then brand. I think that would be fun. Grappling hook pistols, armor for their costumes, stuff like that. I think that would be very important. She has the ballistic cloth. She has the ballistic cloth patent, and apparently is fabricating it because we just learned in the latest Descendants chapter that she has costumes in everybody's size for everyone else so people can impersonate each other if need be. Because Laurel is crazy prepared in a very Batman kind of way. But yeah, she has the ballistic cloth, so I imagine that she is making ballistic cloth costumes for the other superheroes in the world. I think that would be a nice touch. So we'll see. This is why I love doing this podcast, and you probably noticed that I'm doing it off the cuff. You hear all the ums and ahs and stutters. That it's even worse than you imagine because I cut a lot of that out. But yeah, when I talk things out more so than when I write things out, the ideas kind of flow. So that was great. Thanks for listening, and thanks for facilitating that, Internet. Good job. Now you can get away with another atrocity, I'm sure. Not you guys specifically, but the Internet. Because the Internet is always watching. Anyway, this has been the 5th week event. My name is Landon Porter. I am the author of The Descendants, Runebreaker, and many other speculative fiction stories. You can find them at descendantsserial.com. Thank you, and you have a wonderful time until I return again.